This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Beneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening? Who are the newsmakers? What's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. White Plains and the world. This is John Bailey, the old Citizen Net reporter. I extend joyous holiday wishes to those celebrating religious observances at this time of year, a reverent time of year. It's been a week that will long be remembered. So here are the headlines for April 18th, 2019 in White Plains, New York, USA. April 15 turned into a day of disbelief when Notre Dame Cathedral went up in flames while the world watched. April 15th is remembered for survivors of the Titanic that sunk 107 years ago, with the survivors being rescued by the Carpathia. The Carpathia arrived in New York today, April 18th, 107 years ago at Pier 54. The county gives update on pollution of fire foam contaminants at Westchester County Airport and what they're doing about it. The district attorney of Westchester County announces the arrests of 5 alleged drug dealers behind drug supply in Portchester and the adjacent state of Connecticut. In White Plains, the city began its review of the city budget department by department. And you thought football was over, but it's just starting right now in White Plains, New York, USA. We'll tell you about that later. And on this most significant week, billions observe holy observances. Now, let's go to the White Plains Week video newsreel March of Time. And on the scene there, you will see what we saw on Monday. We saw the spire of the famed Notre Dame Cathedral go up in flames, and just a scant 20 to 25 minutes later, it was in a flame and engulfed. And then, if we can go to the next slide, you'll see a before and after of what happened. On the left is the Notre Dame Cathedral as it was. And in the upper right, you will see it in flames from the same perspective. And on the lower right, the aftermath of what is inside the church now. It was a shocking thing for people to see, an event no one had ever expected. After all, the cathedral has been there for about 850 years, and it's the same wood that was was in there, dating back to the Middle Ages, and it's amazing that it went up so fast. And we hope that they will be investigating this thoroughly, examining every piece of burned material to see exactly if there was any way they can pinpoint the cause of it. And of course, they were able to save the relics, many of them, and it was very brave of them to do that. They were prepared to do that, and it was just really an amazing day. It took 4.5 to 5 hours to put that fire out. Began late Monday afternoon in Paris, and it was not out till a little bit after midnight. And the New York Times today has a fantastic explanation of the fire and what happened. But still, the big question is why? How could something go up that fast? After all, if anyone who's ever lighted charcoal, which is dried out wood, essentially, knows that you need a liquid flame lighter to light it, and I use a stovetop starter in which you pack newspaper in, light it, put the charcoal on top of it, and high heat goes up. So it's really amazing. And we still don't know what exactly they were doing to the cathedral a few days beforehand. We just don't know. That hasn't been explained. Hopefully explanations that we can accept will finally appear. And today in New York Harbor, around 107 years ago, the survivors of the Titanic sinking, which occurred on Monday night of this week, April 15th, and there you see a picture of a lifeboat approaching the Carpathia, its rescue ship, and there were not enough lifeboats, and then in the next picture you see them being hoisted up along the side of the Carpathia. That's a poignant shot. It comes from this book, The Titanic Experience, and I have to say, just looking at those pictures just stuns me, and I will say this, that we should remember those people, the 1,500 people that perished that night, and be thankful that 700 were saved. Now, turning back locally to Westchester County, there was a news conference held by the county attorney, John Nona, and he updated us on the latest on the alleged pollution at the Westchester County Airport. And let's go to Mr. Nona.
Now, the new administration, County Executive George Latimer, resumed the biannual, twice a year, groundwater testing of these monitoring wells. That testing was ceased in the prior administration, so there was no testing between approximately 2010 and 2011 and 2018. 52 monitoring wells on the airport site were tested. Again, these are not drinking water wells, they're testing wells to check where the groundwater is going, what contaminants they may be, and whether there's any threat to drinking water supplies. So the results we got, the wells were tested in August and September of 2018 for over 20 PFAS compounds, including PFOA, PFOS, and a whole bunch of other compounds with these chemicals in them. And the results were that 26 of the 52 wells had PFOA and PFOS levels above 70 parts per trillion. And the concentration of this excessive amount was in where the Air National Guard conducted these firefighting training exercises, what we called the burn pit, where they would pour jet fuel, burn it, and then burn the jet fuel, and then put the fire out with firefighting foam. So that's the problem. How are we addressing that problem? Well, we've retained consultants to determine where this groundwater that is contaminated is going. Is it a threat to the Kensico Reservoir or to the Blind Brook watershed? And we're continuing to test monitoring wells, but also doing surface water testing, looking at where surface water may be going that may be contaminated. We also work together with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection. It's their responsibility to test the Kensico Reservoir. And their last test, which was in 2017, in a report that was issued at the end of 2017, the New York City Department of Environmental Protection reported that there was no detection of PFAS chemicals in the Kensico Reservoir. They've advised us that they're not concerned that PFASs are a threat to the reservoir or to the drinking water that goes to New York City. We're in frequent communication with the New York City DEP, and we're in contact with them to determine when they do their next test and what the results of that test will be. What else are we doing? We're negotiating. We're in close contact with the Department of Environmental Conservation of New York State. We're working with them on a consent decree to formulate a work plan and a remediation plan. We in fact have a meeting with the New York Department next Friday that we're attending with our consultants to talk about what they're doing, how they're measuring where this groundwater may be going, and to keep the New York State DEC advised about what we're doing and to work together with them. We are also kept environmental groups advised of our work, and we welcome any suggestions they have as to what we can do. They recommended that we look at the groundwater and where the surface water and when that's going. We adopted that recommendation. We've had 2 meetings with environmental groups since the 2018 administration, since the latter administration came into existence. What we are waiting for is the establishment of a standard. As I mentioned at the outset, this was a health advisory, but there's no standard that has to be met by any remediation. And we're waiting for the New York State Health Department to establish that standard.
And the day after that news conference, a group held a press conference alleging that it's definitely leaking into the reservoir. So we await the new findings on whether or not it's contaminated, and also the results of the consultant's analysis as to whether it's leaking. So it's leaking PFOAs and POAFs. I mean, nomenclature. I mean, it's terrible. At any rate, that's where it stands. And of course, next week, the committee meets on the airport, and they, at last meeting, said they were going to look at rate increases and try and come to a standard. So that will be, those are the airport developments that really create a problem. If they do find that that reservoir is contaminated, or it is supposedly leaking into the reservoir due to the underground water flow, well, it's going to be an expensive cleanup, I would say. Now, breaking news, this came out late Wednesday afternoon. We're taping on Thursday the 18th, and the news was that there has been a big drug arrest in Portchester. The Westchester County District Attorney, Anthony A. Scarpino, and the Village of Portchester Police Chief Richard Conway announced arrests on indictments of drug dealers operating in and around Portchester, neighboring Connecticut, and the Bronx. And the sweep was a culmination of a year-long investigation stemming from fatal heroin overdoses. Portchester Police collaborated with Greenwich Police, began investigating dealers in their communities working across state lines. And 5 men were taken into custody in early morning raids Wednesday in multiple locations in Portchester. Now, this is actually good news, because a lot of these folks also, I believe, sell opioids, according to the press release, and that coupled with the opioid arrests in the Appalachian area indicates that finally we may be getting tough on these opioid problems. But as this story shows, it takes a long time to put together investigations. It's mostly has to be done undercover. It's very difficult work, and this is why it takes so long to try and get control of these problems. Now, coming down locally into White Plains, New York, this week we started budget deliberations by the Common Council, and last night we met these commissioners from the Department of Recreation and Parks, Wayne Bass on the left, Brian Kinney in the center of the library, Commissioner Director of the library, and on the far right, Frank Williams. And they presented a great series of 3 presentations, which I hope to put up on my website shortly. And first up was Brian Kenny of the library, who discussed how popular the library is. And though that slide there shows you exactly how up they are in attendance and participations in activities across the board. It was really eye-opening. And then there was a survey that Mr. Kenny put up that shows that people respond and write him notes based on the Hello Brian notes you can get at the library, and they are highly positive, and as those numbers show. He also talked a lot about the plans for this coming summer. This summer they will start on the gallery renovation shown here. And the gallery renovation is adjacent to the design, to the new home of White Plains Cable TV. Here is a rendering of that new studio space. Large, we could do so much more with it. And it is the first time this has been introduced in public. Wayne Bass was next up, and I've listed just a few of the accomplishments that the Commissioner of Recreation and Parks showed on that slide, and it's very impressive. I had no idea we served so many people in White Plains and outside of White Plains, quite frankly, and this is an absolutely super job by our rec department. And then last on the list, but not least, of course, was Frank Williams, director of the Youth Bureau for many years. And Frank pointed out how many new programs they are basically starting up in addition to the many that they still have and have developed over the years. Now, if you want information on recreation and parks, you should call 422-1336. And if you want to talk to the Youth Bureau about programs for your youngster, 422-1378. And if we can go now to our picture of the mayor, and that's Mayor Roach, who handled the meeting. And Mayor Roach said at the end how the commissioners all worked together so well and complemented each other's services, and that it couldn't have been working better. And he praised the library, the Youth Bureau, and it's just a really great team that these commissioners make to provide services for our youth and our general public. And then, what does it all cost? We have this very, very inexpensive budget. The library, $6,571,096, and you also see the amounts for the other 2 departments, which are net costs. So those departments, the Recreation and Parks and the Youth Bureau, get revenues from their services, and the revenues and the charges are very affordable and inexpensive. Now, moving along on this issue, there's another thing that happened this week. You thought football was over? It's not. It's coming back, and White Plains has it, and we found out all about that earlier this week from George Latimer at the County Center.
The Arena Football League is a little different. It plays an 8-on-8 format, and it's a 50-yard field, and it's surrounded by dasher boards. And the game is much more high-tempo, much more scoring, much more offensively minded game, and that still makes it very exciting. And you'll see enough defense to win a game, but you'll see some very acrobatic plays, lots of passing, lots of really good receivers, and some pretty good cornerbacks too, to make sure the receivers on the Orlando Predators don't catch too many of those balls. The head coach for the Arena football team, Rick Marsilio, is here, and former Syracuse quarterback David Legree. And all of these different organizations that are here, we want to show a good Westchester welcome. We want the people of this county and neighboring counties to come out, come to the games, give them a home team advantage, root for this team, follow the guys that are on this squad, and we'll be able to say we remember when we saw them here, when we see them on television doing wonderful things. We have a Westchester welcome that includes Walter's hot dogs. It's a famous Westchester version. That's probably the league that I play in best, eating. And we also have some passes for Playland Park. And we'll have, we see our friend Coaster's right behind us. You'll see a lot more Coaster in the next month. But you've got to be able to enjoy all of the things that Westchester parks have to offer. The activity of Playland, the activity of the county center, and the other 50 some odd parks that include golf courses and swimming pools and a host of other things. But today we're talking football, and I want to ask Corey Galloway, who's the CEO and the owner of the New York Streets, to come to the microphone. He will take on the MC duties, introduce you to the commissioner of the league, who are players that are here today. But Corey and Tamara are residents of New Rochelle, so they're already Westchester people, but welcome officially to Westchester.
I want to present our New York Streets football to the county exec, and we are happy to have you here. Keep that in your office. It'll be a championship ball by the end of the year. That's our goal.
All right.
So, thank you.
Let's see if Dennis Power from the legislature can catch and pass.
Whoa! There you go.
Touchdown from So Long Latimer, so called because he can throw it a long way. Fantastic. I think this is really a good thing for the county center and Westchester County, because arena football has lasted quite a while, and it is a very good diversion, and their first game is Saturday night at the county center. It starts at 7, so it's not going to be too late, and it's going to be an interesting experiment. I've seen the TV telecasts of it, and it is an extraordinary sight to see. It's sort of like a roller derby speeded up version of football, and not a lot of commercial breaks either, I don't think. But be that as it may, we really have to say that things are really continuing to progress in White Plains. On Maple Avenue and Longview Avenue, the corner of it, you may have noticed a lot of construction there, and something is going up, and they will have a groundbreaking on White Plains Hospital's new 252,000 square foot outpatient care center on Monday. So the hospital continues to grow, and it's very, very good thing for that area. Now, some other things that would have to concern us. This has been a traumatic week across the country. We've been awaiting the release of the Mueller report, and apparently it has come out, and we don't know too much about it. Haven't seen the reports from this morning, Thursday, when we're taping, but I will say this. I don't think anything is going to come of this report. It is right now become a diversion. You're not going to have the House of Representatives vote to impeach Mr. Trump. I do not think that is ever going to happen. So whatever this report says, I don't think a lot is going to come of it. And the fact that Mueller didn't move to bring charges against Mr. Trump was significant, I felt. But we'll just have to plan away. Now, Mr. Trump, in certain acts this week, just did not do very nice things. What he did was he took aim at Cuba, of all places. He cracked down on exports from Venezuela to Cuba, the oil, and he also told Major League Baseball it could no longer accept Cuban players on a program instituted by Barack Obama, the former president. And this is just vindictive, really. And also he also made it possible for the Cuban refugees from 1960 who fled Cuba to sue Cuba for their losses. Now, that we don't know where that is going to go, but truly, this is just not good, because I have been to Cuba. It's one of the most peaceful places you can be, from what I saw in my travels. And I was looking forward to normalizations with Cuba, but obviously that's not going to be. And let's see, Mr. Trump has just continues to distinguish himself each week by totally unexpected moves. It seems he thinks of them overnight and then, boom, does them the next day to see the effect of them. And that's not good. He lurches from issue to issue. And meanwhile, the Democratic Party is just looking at perhaps nominating Bernie Sanders. I mean, he's got the most money. Now, why would you contribute money to the Sanders campaign? It's really interesting to me, because Mr. Sanders is, very up in age, and I do not think he is electable. Now, let's take a few minutes to pause and think about this weekend coming up. It's the Easter weekend, where the Christians celebrate that holiday. And so here are some of the symbols. Here's the hot cross bun, something I always look forward to on the Easter holiday. And it goes back decades, centuries. It was first made in the Middle Ages. And the daffodils come out every year about this time, and they're a harbinger of spring and rebirth. And coming at this time, it's something we really do need: a rebirth of spirit, a rebirth of hope, which seems to be dashed every day. And oh, by the way, I just want to mention that I think this new policy of housing refugees in tents along the southern border is not the way to go. Do you? I mean, come on. Americans never used to do that. We shouldn't be doing it. And now, last on the program, this is a picture of a print I have in my house. It's called Return from Calvary. And this being Good Friday, on this Good Friday night, this shows the time just after the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth, of the Mother Mary returning to her home in Jerusalem, overcome with grief. And it's very evocative. If you look carefully, you can see the place of the skull and the three crosses in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Something to think about. Jesus Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, perhaps the most influential man ever in the history of the world. And we still revere his teachings today. This is John Bailey saying good night. Jim Benroth, Peter Katz, and good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.